Welcome to Evolving Door, the podcast where I interview guests about the moments in their lives that have really moved them forwards, where they had a significant shift in their thinking, their awareness, and their understanding about life in all its various aspects. Join me and expect to be enlivened, enriched, and inspired on your personal journey of evolution. Welcome back to Evolving Door. This is episode 2, part 2 with Jolyon Rubenstein. Let's dive straight back in and see how Cheney got away.
Cheney saw me coming, and there was a veteran in a wheelchair, and he went straight to the veteran in a wheelchair, and I could feel his energy feeling mine. And there were Secret Service people there, and I'll talk about my experiences with those people later. But he knew that if I did a stunt on him there, the sympathy from the audience would go to him and the veteran whose interaction I had messed up. And the thing is that real clever populist politicians understand, like Boris Johnson is many things, Donald Trump is many things, Nigel Farage is many things, but they are absolute artists.
Very clever. Yeah.
You know, the power of image.
Is Dick Cheney the vice president? Is he the one that the film Vice was about? Is that
Yes.
Dick Cheney?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. Sasha Baron Cohen always does better work than us. Sasha Baron Cohen managed to get him in pretty good in Who Is America. But it was interesting watching that show because some people ask me, why don't you do this now and stuff like that. And apart from the fact that I'm almost 40 years old, I think that time has gone.
Well, he's also announced, I believe, that he's not doing a second episode series of that.
Well,
So
he
I
said
think-
that, and yesterday I saw a video of him literally singing, "What do we do with the WHO? Infect them with the Chinese flu." And he's got loads of people singing, and I'm sure there'll be another. You don't get an Emmy nomination, and then a network says, "Let's not do this again." But the thing is that apart from it being extraordinarily different, I genuinely believe things have changed. When Trump got elected, when the Brexit referendum what happened, there was a visceral difference to how our interactions were taking place on the street. Politics went from, as Charlie Brooker put it well, he went meh into being very scary. And for me, what's happened since then, particularly in the grips of the pandemic, is I've had a bit of a new sort of awakening again, which is actually the best purpose I can serve. Doing this podcast and talking on as I do on my Instagram and things. I do this thing this Sunday, but you can see there's like a set behind me. Sunday Papers Live is to talk to people and to talk to people very directly about what I think and what I feel, rather than hide it within a grotesque 2D clown of a character. And I think that along with what I decided to focus on, like if you are a fan of the work and you've seen that stuff, I'm doing scripted drama now. That's what was scripted. There's one comedy that I'm working on which is very silly, but really I think that there's some really fascinating stuff going on around exactly what I was trying to talk to you about at the beginning. Russia, the realities of how huge data sets that people wonder why Dominic Cummings wasn't let go, and it's frankly because his company that he's aligned with, Faculty, who actually initially took on this app, the track and trace app.
it was one of his family members as well was part of it, right? Yeah.
Well, they've gleaned. Well, I'm not quite sure if it was a biological member of his family, but certainly one of his close associates from the Vote Leave campaign. They have a huge data set now on people, and we're entering a new age where the internet is being used to psychographically target people. So if you're not aware of what psychographics are, demographics, are the skew of people. Geographics obviously is we all know what geography is, the skew of the land. Psychographics is the geography of your mind. And they use something called the ocean analysis tool, which is a bit like a heightened Myers-Briggs test.
Yeah.
And it basically looks at your openness, your conscientiousness, your agreeableness, and your neuroticism. And it really sort of tries to target content, particularly to your mindset. And maybe you loved, maybe you hated Nigel Farage's Breaking Point poster, but at least we all saw it. Whereas if you, my friend, are looking at one piece of video content and I'm looking at another, then there's a really big danger that we're going to have a very different perception.
We think we're all looking at the web and it's the same web, but it's totally tailored, right?
I think particularly now that really, you know, my father in his 60s, you know, is late 60s really, is his age group are the biggest users of Facebook in the world. You know, that people don't know what they don't know. And this stuff is very compelling, very powerful, very well made.
And back to that point you said earlier, sorry to jump in, but back to the point you made earlier about when we used to have the newspapers, we would just read them. And so a lot of, especially older people, are looking at Facebook and the stuff in the same way, aren't they? They're just thinking this is just the news.
Yeah, I don't want to sort of, you know, I'm certainly not beating on baby boomers, like in terms of, look, it's very clever. A lot of money, billions of dollars and rubles and pounds have been utilized to weaponize doubt. You know, it is age of doubt. It is the age where, you know, you can doubt science, you can doubt vaccinations, you can
everything. It's so confusing, isn't it, though, with the whole fake news idea. I mean, that's one thing that seemed to be coined by Trump, and it's a sort of it's a very disruptive and but it's such a genius thing, if you like, from a disruptive person's kind of approach. What he's almost now cast out on anything practically.
Well, it's very strange, because I think what is actually rather edifying is the fact that there is an issue when the chickens come home to roost. And the terrifying and incredibly worrying truth is right now that coronavirus is doing exactly that in the United States. And it's you know, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy what is taking place in some of those states. You have the mass gathering of people with no face masks, with no protective equipment, who are
they don't even believe it's real, right? Pretty much.
There's a total dispelling of that. And as you saw after his abortive rally, I mean, which was literally the most offensive thing to me that I've seen him do, because it was in Tulsa, and Tulsa is the site of, you know, the hellfire that was rained down on Black Wall Street. If you don't know about this, it's something that's so incredibly important to understand, because there was a pocket of affluent entrepreneurial Black America that was crushed by the Ku Klux Klan, by the local government. They were bombed from the sky. You know, that doesn't happen without huge coordination. And that's where he decided to hold his rally. And that is a deliberate, purposeful signal, just like this is. If you're not aware, you see him doing this all the time. This is a KKK symbol. And if you look at any number of Trump videos, and if you look at any of the pictures of the militarized police, who are often very proudly taking pictures around Black Lives Matter, more often than not, you'll see that or this.
So it's just for people who are listening, it's what your first finger and your thumb together, right?
It's this, and then it's this. It's basically under his eye. I mean, it's kind of as simple as one of those kind of cold words. I would really strongly recommend. HBO have just put their series Watchmen on HBO.com. It's, if you haven't got Sky, it's incredibly important at the minute that people use the amazing parts of popular culture that have informed people to understand some of this stuff. Because if you don't get it, if you're not seeing what is actually straight in front of your eyes. A really good example of that, something that I blew my mind a couple of days ago, or not a couple of days ago, but it was literally maybe in the last 3 weeks, was the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth I understood as the Commonwealth Games, the Commonwealth of countries, blah, 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 blah. What the Commonwealth actually is a term for is what the British government found a name for the, in today's money, 71 billion pounds worth of resources, which we ransacked from Africa and the West Indies. And they called it the Commonwealth.
Irony, yeah.
Like, it's been right there the whole time. And there's so many things like that I think this is part of the learning that's taking place. I suppose in a way that brings me on a little bit to talk about, you know, Black Lives Matter and the importance I think that has.
You've been focusing on that a lot, right, during the lockdown, particularly. tell me a bit about, I'll tell you very briefly a little bit my experience just in a couple of sentences, and then it might, so when it really hit off. I mean, Black Lives Matter obviously is not a new thing. We a couple of years ago, we're aware of it, and then everybody saw the video of George Floyd. And I think it's been an interesting time, and it's been great. I've been following you very carefully, kind of talking about it and stuff. But I think for a lot of people, they've been trying to get their head around it, and maybe taking some time to kind of, I know I didn't want to, I posted the black square, and then I know that, people were saying, well, don't use it with the hashtag because it'll overtake the thing. But then it was kind of like, I didn't want to say something else immediately until I'd really formulated my feelings about it, because I didn't want to just do it for the sake of just, but talk me through some of the evolution of your experience.
Let's talk about what you just said, because actually in what you said is some super key things that need to be dealt with. So look, you're a well-meaning guy, you seem like a stand-up guy, but you're a white guy, right? Yeah. So you feel like, oh, if I'm posting this, is in some way patronizing? Is there sort of narcissism I'm playing into here? Is there something egoic that's going on that makes me feel like, will I offend people when I do stuff? And actually, I thought Meghan Markle put it very well, where she said, I thought about it for a long time, and I realized that saying something was better than saying nothing. Yeah. Now, I have been deeply disturbed by the amount of people with huge platforms who sit on the sidelines. Now, this is one of those times in history where something has shifted, because what we all witnessed was an 8-minute snuff film. It was a lynching. It was the death of a man in front of our very eyes. And as you quite rightly say, this has been going on for years. Now, when we say this has been going on for years, I want to further qualify that statement. But before I do, I want to talk about your response. Your response was a response of many, many people who I speak to very regularly. Now, the thing is about social media is it has completely fucked our minds about the idea that somehow by digitally actually stating your abhorrence at something, or you're upset at an issue that has been, profoundly devastating, that you are somehow virtue signaling. Now, virtue signaling was a term that was created by Richard Pearl and the alt-right in America as a deliberate tactic to disembowel empathy with migrant groups, particularly at the time, Mexican, people who ICE were picking up, undocumented people in the United States. It has been terrifyingly effective. Now, so first of all, I want to say,
because it almost shames people back into silence, right?
Exactly. And the first thing I want to say is, like, I totally understand where that comes from. I totally understand people. I get it. I'm certainly no different from you. I understand where that comes from. The second thing is about experience. So I grew up in inner city London. I grew up in Archway. I had black friends from when I was a child. I had Arab friends, Muslim friends, white friends, but predominantly white. And when I went to a private school, it was almost exclusively white. And but they were part of my life. I never had that issue of not understanding that. Children, I believe that children don't see race. I don't think they involved with that. They see a person. I found it extremely confronting to see the level of violence that was being exerted on essentially peaceful protesters initially. I was watching videos online of, for me, the one that I'll never ever forget really is these NYPD cars being surrounded by protesters and then slamming on the accelerator.
I saw that, yeah.
Right. Now, I lived in New York. I've seen protesters I went to anti-Iraq war protesters where I saw women same age as my mother being dragged by the hair through the street. American police are vicious. But also Chomsky had talked a lot to me about the idea of the means of violence. Now, what was also happening for me, and I've really unpicked this, is I was having unbelievable dreams, partly because of lockdown, partly because of bizarre things. And I realized that what was happening was a lot of repressed memories were coming through. So I'd filmed with the KKK, I'd filmed with the Arizona border defenders, I'd filmed in Tent City Prison, which is a maximum security prison where Joe Arpaio, who Trump actually exonerated, was basically dealing with a concentration camp. And it's very hard to describe as a human being what it's like when you go into a scenario with a fake identity, a kind of fawning identity, because you're drawing these people towards you.
Well, you're almost using their views to make them comfortable and get them to say more about their views, right?
Exactly. But that doesn't also detract from the human experience of actually witnessing what is going on. So this was the first prison to have women on chain gangs. They were hired out so they could bury the dead. There were women in there for smoking a joint or for prostitution or whatever. And I was encountered in that prison by many people who handed me notes saying, I'm not supposed to be in here. And I didn't do anything about it. I was filming. I was seriously involved with what I was doing. And they were traumatic experiences. And also, you know, being honest, when you make a television show like The Revolution We Televised, everyone just looks at the comedy. You don't really look about what you've experienced. And I realized there was some stuff that I felt needed to be said. And I also felt like I was in a position, and I have a platform, not a big platform, not by any means, not in today's digital terms,
but nonetheless a platform for sure. Yeah,
enough of a platform to advocate entirely for the Black Lives Matter protest, not just because Britain is institutionally racist, but because of the realities of the entire body of work that I've done is about follow the money. Now, you have to understand here that slavery in Britain and then exported out was about cheap labor. It was about economics.
It was economic, yeah.
It was about the idea that, you know, slavery in the United States, if it was in the North, the East Coast, it was about textiles. And if it was in the South, it was about cotton picking, particularly in agriculture. Now, you have to understand this to understand when we talk about systemic change and abolitionism. Because right now, the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK is profoundly embryonic. There are many different groups who believe various different things. Some of them are hardcore abolitionists. And I describe that a bit like Extinction Rebellion is an abolitionist movement, whereas some of them are pragmatists. So back to the environmental, that's more like Greenpeace. And even though Greenpeace do very, big stunt actions, Greenpeace work with governments directly.
It's linked to practical steps and change and policy and all of that. Yeah,
MPs working with the system that is. Now, there is a profound shift in consciousness taking place as the result of George Floyd. Now, if you're familiar with the term of the Overton window, that is the window in which public discourse is mooted and people speak. So as an example, when Donald Trump in his election campaign in 2016 talked about the Muslim ban, that shifted everything. I'm just seeing it's backwards here. That shifted everything to the right. And the reason that was because the presidents say it, or because the presidential nominees say, we can report it as news, we can talk about it, and people can probably say it. Another very clear example of this is when Boris Johnson referred to Muslim women in hijabs as being letterboxing. And numerous charities and NGOs documented that after that statement, there was an 80% rise in hate crime, which they directly attributed to that statement. What Black Lives Matter has done, de facto, is it has pulled everything the other way. And there are now actual debates going on about whether or not people should defund the police. Now, you like that or hate that, agree with it or not agree with it, it is now
it's an incredible position to be in. Yeah. And I'll say that I agree completely. One thing that when Black Lives Matter was out, say 3 or 4 years ago, I remember myself thinking at the time, and I, as you say, I'm very, very generally very supportive of anybody who's being oppressed or put in a difficult situation. But I remember thinking, but all lives matter at that time. This time round, I totally got the difference. I totally got it and I had many, many conversations with many, many people kind of about it, where at this moment, right now, it is an incredible moment. And right now, it's important that we focus on Black Lives Matter.
Well, I think there are a couple of things there, my friend. I think there are a couple of things there. So what we're talking about, you see, is action and reaction. Black Lives Matter say Black Lives Matter. So the reaction to that is all lives matter from the other side.
Yes.
Binary, confrontational, our basic normality of, you know, Twitter fueled, misogynistic, you know, hate speech fueled platform against what the algorithms want. Outrage. The truth is that what we're looking at here is the beginning of a giant awakening that is partly driven by what happened with George Floyd. It's massively driven by the pandemic. It's massively driven by the consciousness that was already in people's minds about the decay of the planet, climate collapse, and hugely as well, I believe, for a lot of white people, particularly Extinction Rebellion, which hit something, which spoke directly to some sort of need. The important thing to understand is that all of these things are part of a larger movement up of these social issues that are also in response to a fascistic, openly racist, white supremacist in the White House. These things are all interrelated. So what then happened was the British government took a rather clever approach, which was to say, we're going to invert this narrative. And what we're going to make it about is our surprise and our dismay and our pain that a murder that took place thousands of miles away can be reflected back at little old us, well-meaning, won 2 world wars and 1 World Cup, the champions who beat fascism, us. And what that did was it enabled what people call dog whistle politics, which is when you whistle out to those groups. People are like, yeah, don't take that away from us. If we give them this, what are they going to take next?
Yes.
The issue of Winston Churchill and the idea that this is a new issue is totally ridiculous. People have recognized for an awfully long time that there are huge issues with the character of Winston Churchill. But Winston Churchill wasn't something we were discussing in January. It's something we're discussing now because the entire edifice and narrative of an economic system that perpetuates indentured servitude, either economically or through the means of violence, on populations and groups of people who are the most vulnerable in society, who in previous generations went through legal servitude, slavery, and now other economic forms of oppression, are all of this is at stake. And the best fighting tool you have is to bring back up the national hero, is to bring back up the totemic force of an uneducated population's sense of who Britain is, who we are. And that's why they're doing it. And it's also, just to finish up on this point, proof that this change is real and it's being taken incredibly seriously at the highest echelons of the establishment. And I don't mean some shadowy group of people here. I mean lots of people with lots of individual skin in the game who can call each other up and go, hey, should we put this headline? Yeah, let's do that. Are we going to? Yeah, because that's what it is. It's what's happening in phone calls.
It's very interesting that it kind of brings us back to where we started earlier on about how history is being told in a certain way. And one thing that's very exciting about the moment we're in right now is that hopefully at least large portions of people are willing to relook at history and to think about what really happened. Or let's be more honest. Let's try to be more honest about, yes, this may have happened and that might have been good for us and whatever else. But in the process of doing that, how did...
Well, I think it's really important to say this. The entire British Empire exists as a result of the rape, pillage, and pilfer of literally hundreds of countries. When you are a small country with the strongest naval presence in the world, you conquer markets by capital or by force. If they resist, you use force. And that is exactly what we did all over the world. With Hong Kong, it was about opium. With a lot of North Africa, it was about mineral resources. You know, with India, it was about rice and it was about silk, right? Like this is historical fact. This isn't an opinion. This is how we came to be the richest nation on earth.
And you can understand why people won't want to be having that conversation now, because if you take that, let's just say, trump card out of the game in terms of how they can play the economic game, then it's no longer, or it's harder now to amass huge amounts of wealth, because the people who are going to be subjugated to kind of have that extra advantage, that little kind of trump card will be taken away. It's going to be pretty crap, right, for them.
Friend, it's interesting because I feel like we're going through two things at once. I saw a very interesting report yesterday that said only 6% of people polled by the BBC talked about wanting society to return to anything like it had been before after the pandemic. There has been a period of essential physical repression that has taken place, which is literally never happened in either your or my life.
It's mind-blowing. The year has been mind-blowing. Yeah,
it's changed things. It's changed the nature of money, because we suddenly realized that when we want to release huge amounts of money, we can in unprecedented ways. And that's because the Bank of England, which is a private organization, which is not part of the state, can issue a bond. Sorry, the government can issue a bond to the Bank of England saying an IOU, and they can give us £100 trillion, because that is the nature of money. It is made up. It is I mean, that's what makes debt and interest so odious. There's that issue. There is the issue of a feeling, an underlying feeling that people have had for generations that things aren't right. But there is the other reality, which is that for a pocket of society, and I believe it is a pocket, I don't believe it's nationwide. I think the right is losing all kinds of support in many ways. Maybe not in the short term, but certainly in the long term. I mean, I want to talk about this Generation Z and the people I've met doing this thing, because they give no fucks. It is not the same. They see the world very differently. They know they have to clean up our mess. That is something very profound. I certainly didn't think I even had a mess to clean up when I was a teenager. They do, in a profound way. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the truth is that I thought it was incredibly important as a white, privileged man, heterosexual man, to stand up and say, firstly, I understand I will never understand. I understand I will never understand. It's not about reading books. I'm never going to understand microaggressions. I'm never going to live within a black body, look out from it, have the experience of walking into my office and a woman hurrying before me and closing the door just to make sure that I'm not realizing that I work in the same building. You know, I'm never going to experience that. However, we created this problem and we need to fix it, because it's a bit like, you know, black people feeling they need to explain themselves. I've had some really confronting experiences in the last 3 weeks. I was at a place in Clapton and a woman came up to me, a black woman came up to me crying, thanking me in sort of bizarre terms, well, not bizarre, I love you, Carol, but very profound terms, saying that she'd gone to a university, predominantly her WhatsApp group of friends from uni were white, and she thought she could only make people understand the importance of Black Lives Matter if they had a white person speak to them. I mean, that is messed up in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, exactly. It's so ironic. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I was speaking to a young person about it, and I was having lots of individual conversations with people about it. And he said to me, yeah, it seems like there's more stuff about America. So I was wondering what I could do. I reached out to a filmmaker friend who's a black guy, and he put me in touch with someone else. And I did a kind of a podcast interview with him about the UK to try and better understand a little bit from the UK context.
Let me just tell a couple of things to your viewers so they can understand. So the first thing I do is recommend specific things. So one of the things I recommend is this book. This is a Carla's book, Natives.
He's amazing.
Kingsley is a profoundly intelligent man. You know, we can talk both. Our mutual adoration is unbound, I'm sure. So I was very embarrassed to learn that this was only 2 days ago that I read this about the New Cross massacre. And the New Cross massacre took place in the 1980s, where a group of teenagers were having a party and their house was set alight and 14 people burnt to death in New Cross. And this was, most historical record would be fair to say, on either side, was deliberate and was caused by the police. And the police officers got away scot-free. And this actually generated the first ever British black protests, where 60,000 black people came onto the streets and looked into it. Now, all you need to know about that is that I had no idea about that until 2 weeks ago. So I've spent most of my professional life, especially in the last 10 years, surrounded by journalists talking about corruption, talking about hypocrisy, talking about greed, talking about issues of civil liberties. And that was never brought to me once, never even mentioned. So it's a profoundly important thing to understand. And if you look at the Comcast and CNN poll, which showed, surprise, surprise, white people in this country don't think there's a problem with racism in general. Black people do. That there is an entire historical narrative of the police and of systems of power and how they're exerted on people that you may not even be aware of the facts of that at all, even if you read Private Eye. Almost exclusively white people work in that building. If you read the New Statesman, almost exclusively people work in that building. Or the Guardian, listen, there are some black people who work there, obviously, but predominantly white.
Yeah. So
there is knowledge that you need to find out about. So, for instance, 4% of the 4% of the population in Britain is black. 50% of the UK prison population is black, right? Yeah. That's because of not just the, privatization of prison systems and profit. It's about disproportionate sentencing. It's about
is that in the UK?
This is all in the UK. Everything I'm saying in the UK. There has been 1,744 deaths in police custody, right? Not one police officer has served jail time as a result. Now, only about 500 of those people are black. But when you look at the percentage of the population who is black and the number that represents, that is an extraordinary amount of people, given the amount of black people in the United Kingdom. Now, you can take this much, much further back, because ultimately, America is only 200 years old. Where do you think they gleaned the idea of utilizing slave labor
in the first place? Yeah. And I watched the doc. You must have seen it, I'm sure. But I've been telling people that documentary 13th was mind blowing about how, with the so-called abolition of slavery, they maintained it in a new form through the making people criminals and then being allowed to essentially treat them as slaves. Yeah.
Also, you need to just look at the waves of immigration into the United Kingdom. Opium was outlawed in the United Kingdom to criminalize Asian people. Marijuana was criminalized in the United Kingdom to criminalize the Windrush generation. This is a profound issue. And you also have to remember that if you grew up in a Commonwealth country like Jamaica, for instance, you were constantly talked about, what was constantly talked about was like Mother Britain, mother country, the motherland, the Holy Land, where you would be welcomed in because the Queen and the people of England were the kindest people in the world. And all these people who invited to the United Kingdom then faced bigotry, racism, and xenophobia on a different level. Now, I want to talk a bit about these kids who I've met. And if you're on Instagram, particularly, follow @AllBlackLivesUK. Right, there are a lot of different groups in this thing. There's LDN, BLN. There's Black Lives Matter UK. There's an awful lot, but I would really recommend following them. I will follow these kids. I will be with them. I've tried to be there every Sunday, and I do think this is a really important thing to say. Social change only happens when there are enough boots on the ground. That is the difference between an abolitionist mindset, who's like, we need to just make so much noise that I have to do something, and I think a pragmatist mindset, which is like, we need to lobby for legislative change, we need to implement the recommendations. The truth is, one often leads into another, in my opinion. You're not actually going to have system change in this country until there's a government that takes power that causes some change. I have no hope that we're going to have a revolution anytime soon. But the thing that worries me the most about good meaning white Guardian reading liberals is that they might go once, take a couple of photos on Instagram, have a bit of a yell online, and never go again.
That's kind of back to the point I was making earlier about wanting to digest it a bit more before I started to, because I think it's very easy to tokenistically kind of go, I kind of, I'm with that, and then just totally forget about it.
Look, listen, mate. I mean, just being honest, like, I don't know if you live in London or not, but these things are often a long way away from people, right? They're not. It's not like, and I have a small niece. I don't have children of my own, but kids are hectic. Grandparents need you, parents need you. People have things to do. I understand all of that, and doing something, I want to be super clear, is much better than doing nothing. But the truth is that signing a change.org petition or putting up a square on Instagram won't change anything. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not important to do those things, because I think a lot of the time what people forget, especially if you have a fraternity of friends where maybe you only have a couple who are black, this shit matters, man. It's really important to show empathy, to show that you appreciate that they may be going through an awful lot of trauma. One of the things that I've learned is I'm trying not to put up any more violent videos, because I think that's actually quite triggering to a lot of people. It doesn't necessarily help. And also, I think we all become so inured to that already, unfortunately, that it's not really cutting through. The experience of being black and British in the United Kingdom is a profoundly race-orientated experience. They can never get away from it. They are targeted by police disproportionately for stop and search. They are disproportionately sentenced in the criminal justice system. As David Lammy said, only 1% of British judges are black. They do not have the representation in there. And you can help in many different ways. If you have a business, you can give someone who doesn't have the experience an opportunity. You can do a lot that way. There isn't just one lane to this. If you can't get to a protest, maybe. And the big thing that is a big thing for me at the minute is challenge people when they say things that are racist.
And I'm with you 100%. So I agree with very much with that last point you made about, I think it's not enough to just feel the empathy and think, isn't it really bad? I agree that it must change. We have to want it to change and make sure that we push through for it to change. But I agree very much with having different lanes, because I don't live in London, so I'm not going to be able to be there at the process every week, for example. And I'm glad that lots of people are. But I have had even members of my family or my neighbor chat to me about it, and it's very disguised racism and very subtle. But absolutely disagree. And I will be looking out for many opportunities over the coming months and years and whatever to do what I can, where I can to change this. Say again?
It's a life's work.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, as you say, but it's important that we don't drop it mentally and we keep the fire alive, if you like. Not just, right now is the moment of Black Lives Matter, but equally for all people who are going to be.
It's really important we address this, because the thing is, let's talk about your neighbor or your family member. Now, that neighbor may well have had a successful business that's just gone up. That family member may actually be someone who has lived through indentured servitude themselves, because in a lot of ways, the economic realities of being white, underprivileged, poor educational outcomes is very similar to a lot of the experiences that a lot of people going through indentured racial servitude do, except you're never going to be profiled by the color of your skin. So yeah,
it's not systemic, really.
No, but it is systemic. And this is the point, is that actually, if you look at the areas of the country, if you literally have a map and you look at the areas of the country since 2010 that have suffered the greatest and most unprecedented government cuts in their budget, these are cuts that will affect library closures, that will affect social care, that will affect mental health provision, the soft cuts that can be made within a council budget, right? What you'll also find is that the exact same areas are the strongholds of the EDL, formerly the BNP, the Nationalists, the Football Hooligans Association, essentially, UKIP, the Brexit Party. This is where the two things come directly into correlation. Because in a lot of these areas, what you also had was an immigrant population. Now, what the refugee crisis tried to teach us all was that those who can migrate are often very wealthy in the countries they come from. Otherwise,
and very educated as well. Yeah.
How would they possibly be able to afford to go and pay, to pay human traffickers, to pay people to get across borders? And a lot of the time when they come into communities, they're first generation immigrants, there is a huge pressure on them to achieve educationally.
Yeah.
And so it's hard work, right? But a lot of these kids who they may be in classes with may come from very difficult home lives. They may have, mental health issues. They may have, very, very difficult economic circumstances. And a lot of the time, these kids from an immigrant background are doing better than them. Now, what does that feel like?
Oh, it makes you feel shit. Yeah, it would make those kids feel inadequate, etc. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is deeply. As I said, it's all about the money. It's always follow the money. But the truth is, this particular instance sheds a very important light on things, because if you don't understand this, if you don't understand this core conceptual idea that these people going through economic servitude have been let down by the government, so they feel emboldened to say, well, all lives matter. All lives matter. I haven't got a great life. Why does this person's life get on? Like, why is it so much more important? Maybe they leave school at 16. They start reading newspapers where hyperbole and xenophobic, really well-tested lines from focus groups, from high data sets that really fucking piss people off, or that really resonate, like take back control. And they pummel them at their brains. They condition them. And this is the thing, we're all victims of a type of conditioning. And this is why I'm not doing comedy anymore, because it's difficult to do this stuff as comedy. It's a lot easier to talk to you about it.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back. You had that huge success with Revolution Will Be Televised. You won a BAFTA, I guess, a level of fame, etc. And you mentioned prior to that you were had a pattern of self-sabotaging. How did you deal with that explosion of fame, attention? Did you manage to not continue to self-sabotage, or what happened?
Oh, I think, one of the things that I wanted to say to you, because you said this was a lot to do with turning points, was picking up that BAFTA and thinking, oh my God, this is it. Looking out at all these famous people there, and then sort of the next day realizing that nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. Fame and the desire to be really recognized is absolutely paper thin. And that's why so many people in the public eye go so completely off the rails, because there is no real happiness that comes through that. Your happiness comes through being okay with yourself, believing your words and your actions correlate, your friendship groups, your family, fraternity, love. And that was a huge life lesson for me, because I think I genuinely thought it would bring me happiness. I think that I thought there was definitely, you don't do shows like even the socially conscious shows unless you've got some kind of ego. You just don't know it. The very thought of actually trying to be someone else and act is an act of getting away from yourself. It takes certain personality types to do it. So no, I there were times I found it, very confronting. But also I feel that, what we've tried to do is, we moved from television to podcasting. We did a show called News Roast, and I did a show called We Need to Talk About Spotify. Been very lucky. And now I've decided that the best way to talk to a mass of people is through drama. So, it might take me a couple of years, but that's where I'm at now.
That's where you're headed. Yeah. Interesting. Tell me about self-care. How do you look after yourself?
Sometimes it's as easy as playing FIFA. Sometimes it's just taking a bath. Sometimes it's watching Harry Kane and Tottenham massively disappoint me yet again. You need to take time for yourself. You only have a finite amount of energy. And, a lot of these battles that we're talking about are very long term. I do believe in exercise now a lot more than I did. I believe you need a spiritual practice. For me, that is, meditating, yoga. For a lot of people, it's running. Like running, I got really into during lockdown as well. You know, there are many different forms of this, but it's about taking time, looking at oneself, understanding why one is doing things. And listen, you know, this isn't like some, you know, I'm on some Messiah Russell Brand, you know, I'm the enlightened one tip. The reason it's called mindfulness is because you have to do it every day. And most days I don't do it, you know, but I've now know in my darker times when stuff goes wrong, when stuff starts not making sense, when I don't get why something's happening, something in me goes towards that practice. You know, I try to take a month. I try to fuck off for a month every year at the beginning of the year.
Do you go to India?
It's my place, man. Yeah, go to a place called. You know, I have been going for many years. A place called Agonda and a place called Patnam, and Goa. And I was very lucky because I'm freelance. I've always been self-employed. I am my ideas. I can just as easily write on my laptop there as somewhere else. And in my industry, very little often happens in January. I mean, to be honest, now very little is happening at any time.
Exactly.
But it's very important. I'm a big believer in that idea that you only see something clearly when you're outside of it, and to take things when you're outside, you look back and you're like, this is important. This isn't. I kind of wanted that, but not as much as I want this. I need to focus my time and energy on this.
Clarity, yeah. Well, I just want to finish up. It's really interesting to hear what you said. It was one of the things I was going to ask you about. Did you become not disillusioned, but like you had huge attention and great impact, I would say, and woke a lot of people up to the serious issues you were doing through comedy. But the way that you have now sort of felt like you're going to shift towards more direct activism and maybe drama, is that because you feel it'll have greater impact? Did you feel in some way that you weren't able to have the impact you hoped through the comedy?
The Revolution We Televised ran for 3 series. And the truth is also it's about material. So you can't do the same thing twice. If you're going to do a sketch about, you know, the really big stuff in episode 1, you know, by the time you get to episode 4 of series 3, you might be looking at, don't get me wrong, the horse meat scandal is a big deal, but it's a bit witch magazine, you know? So there's an issue there. I think if there was, I mean, the truth is that issues are very different now to where they were then. If we're never going to totally close the door on that, but Hayden and I also, you know, we read quite a lot about Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and we you know, most comedy pairs end up absolutely hating each other. You know, we got to the point where we had just different ways of doing things. We wanted to do, you know, do things our own way. And for me, I'm realizing that, you know, I can do a lot more by just talking to people at the minute. And, you know, I'm more mature than I was in my early 30s. I've got a clearer sense of exactly who I am and what I want to say in a very unflinching way. It's not like I'm not open to other people's opinions. It's just I know my mind. And also drama now and the reality of bingeable content
is powerful.
It's a very powerful thing, but it's also, it didn't exist when we made The Revolution We Televised. So now I really feel like there's an opportunity. Also, I really want to talk to America. You know, I'm very, very interested in this idea of, you know, is it ever right to do the wrong things for the right reasons? Because we're getting to a point of climate collapse. We're getting to a point of, you know, as everyone's seen, you know, horrendous realities around, you know, race and police brutality and things like that. And how do things change? And that is something that I think sometimes you can explore as fiction in a much less, you know, you don't want people to watch things and go, oh, it's from this leftist viewpoint, I'm not going to watch anymore. Otherwise, there's no point.
Yeah, I agree. There's been a lot of very powerful, what's her name? Female actress. She's got her home production company. She does a lot of really powerful drama about social issues. But I'm trying to think who it is.
Michaela Cole.
No, it's I'll look it up and I'll send it to you. But really, really powerful, total drama, but seriously hard-hitting issues. A lot of female leads and stuff, but just genius drama, and has a huge impact, which is ultimately, if that's your desire, is to get people to empathize and connect with an issue, then it is a hugely powerful medium.
Different ways of doing that. Like my television show, I've got a show on ITV2 called Don't Hate the Players, which is a hip-hop entertainment show. I'm very proud of that show. That's the first show ever, panel show ever, have an all-black, all-female panel.
Yeah.
You know, Representation is very important. Things are just, I think, because my first TV show, we won a BAFTA. I want to make, I want to make films, and I want to make large scale series. And what I've also realized is when you start again in a different genre, you start from the bottom. So you're slowly, going and doing that stuff. And in the meantime, there's an awful lot of stuff to say. The internet is reactive, and it's real, and it's an ecosystem. And right now, it's very important to me that we do call Boris Johnson a racist, because he is one. That we do talk about institutional racism in the United Kingdom, because our institutions were formed on the back of servitude, slavery, right? That, how could they not be? How could they not be? It's important to, this is very important for people to understand how far back the story goes. When is the beginning of the story? What are we teaching people?
Yes, it's Reese Witherspoon. Big Little Lies is the series.
Yes, yeah. Of course, that is extremely powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. So just to finish up, these are some, I call them like some of the big pillars in life. I'd love you to just one or two sentence answers just on where you're at with them now, and maybe if there's been an evolution over time as well. First one, family.
Miss them. I miss my family. It's my mum is high risk, so I haven't seen her for a long time. And thinking about starting my own, I'm 40. I'm going to be 40 years old next year. And thinking about having kids. I had a definitely extended adolescence, but it's family is also foundational. It's about, I've got a family of friends. I have extremely fraternal ties. You are your community. You spend time with people you care about, and I think it's very important to say, if you have a toxic family, move away from them. It's just that simple. There's been members of my family I've had to move away from. It's important.
Yeah, great. Health.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything in moderation, including moderation. I spend time. My girlfriend's a PT, so I mean, I don't really have much choice a lot of the time. But I think it's really important. The endorphins that are generated by just a 15-minute run will change your day completely. But it's it's important. I get my steps in.
Yeah. Money
is the root of all evil. So
is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not even like there are study after study. You need enough money to survive, right? But if you talk to anyone who, I mean, I could tell you a fucking story now, but I have been privileged enough to have had some insane experiences where I've been in helicopters and gone to private yachts of people who are so unhappy. It is astounding, because most studies show that once you get past having enough money to kind of have a decent house, more than that doesn't really sort of increase your happiness, and in fact, what are you not doing whilst you're doing that, but yeah, money is the root of all evil, but it's also a necessary thing within a system where if you don't have any, you are profoundly let down at the moment, because that is the reality of not having any social safety net, which is what the vast majority of people in this country, suffer from.
Sure. Love
is the answer. Money is the root of all evil, and love is the answer. I mean, it's, these are profoundly centralized questions. This is ancient wisdom, that has reverberated through the ages in different ways, and that's why there's nothing like a love song.
Yeah, it touches us very deep, doesn't it? Friendship.
It's the glue. It holds people together. It holds, and in a very real way, with your mental health. I'm very, very lucky to have some and I think, lockdown really shows, who's really important and who's actually there for you. And the people who actually are just good time friends.
Yes, interesting. And lastly, just to finish up, creativity and expression in your life, is it important, and how has that evolved for you, if it has?
For me, I don't think you have ideas. I think ideas have you. I think there's a very famous Paul McCartney song about how when he woke up and he just yesterday had just written itself. But also for me and for many people, creativity is a way of shielding oneself and processing the world. So the reason that I stay energized, I stay vivacious, I stay centered, is because when I hear that thing that's terrible, set something off, and I end up creating something and pushing it out again. It's almost like an energetic sort of flow. You take it in and you push it out. And I think if you don't push it out, life will sit on you and it will press you down. And I believe that's at the heart of a lot of depressions. I believe it's at the heart of a lot of people's mental illness, just stymieing due to self-sabotage of not using your creativity.
So it's been a really important and powerful force for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It really has. Listen, I need to go and watch Harry Kane being creative.
Yeah, so, no worries. Listen, man, I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Very nice talking to you as well.
Thank you so much to Jolyon. That was such a great conversation. He's a really lovely guy, super talented. And I love his passion for creating work that, as he says, speaks and tries to advocate for the most vulnerable in society. And make sure you check out his work. He's on social media at Jolyon Rubs. Very excited to see what he comes up with next, particularly around scripted drama, which can be so powerful. Please make sure you subscribe. Next week I've got Seema Gonzai, who's a filmmaker. She went off at about 20 years old and cycled around Cambodia, Vietnam and Thailand. In those days there was no mobile phones or internet, and she didn't actually tell her parents. But luckily she survived to tell the tale, and she'll be sharing some of that with us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please rate and review. It's so encouraging to see your reviews come through and to get the great ratings we've been having so far, and it helps us to reach more people. Please do tell a friend, as I really want to build up this community of us who are sort of encouraging each other on our journey of evolution. So I'll see you in episode 3, and in the meantime, have a great week.